Welcome to the Break the Silence podcast, brought to you by Aid to the Church in Need, the Catholic charity helping persecuted and other suffering Christians worldwide. Please subscribe to the podcast on your favorite platform and follow us on social media. I'm Amy Balog, the marketing executive at ACN UK, and today I'm very grateful to be joined by Father Will Conquer, who is a Catholic priest and missionary of the Archdiocese of Monaco. He was sent to Cambodia on behalf of the Paris Foreign Mission Society and has been serving in the country for 6 years. Father Will has written a book about St Carlo Acutis, one of the first ever books titled A Millennial in Paradise, and he knows St Carlo's mother, Antonia, personally. We are going to talk about St Carlo's life and legacy, as well as ACN's help for the church in Cambodia. Hi, Father Will. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hello, Amy.
So to begin, could you share a little bit about your background and what led you to missionary work in Cambodia?
So my name is Father Will Conquer, and so as you mentioned, I'm a Catholic priest and a missionary. I was ordained in 2018 on the feast of Our Lady of Fatima in Monaco. I became a priest and was sent off to missions after completing my studies in Thomistic theology in Rome at the Angelicum. And I was sent to Cambodia, where I've been for the past 6 years. Of course, the missionary life is less and less talked about. There's fewer and fewer European missionaries. But back in the day, France was one of the greatest missionary countries in the world. France, which is truly the eldest daughter of the church, had incredible treasures to share with the world. Of course, as you know, the spirituality of Thérèse of Lisieux, who was the precursor of missioning. That's why you see her statue all over the places. All those French missionaries put her little statue wherever they went, Or even Our Lady of Lourdes, the grottos and everything was shared by the French missionaries. Or even the devotion to the Sacred Heart, Parel Monial. And all those things were beautiful treasures, which were not colonial kind of like ideologies, but just a desire to share our greatest treasure, which was our Catholic faith. That's what French missionaries endeavor to do to this day. We still have, thanks be to God, many young missionaries embracing the call. We need more, of course, but I'm very proud to be one of them.
And Cambodia is a country where the Christian population is way less than 1% of the population. So how's life there, and what unique challenges do you face in your daily work?
So, yes, absolutely. Cambodia is one of the nations that we called unreached, like Saudi Arabia or Mongolia, places where you have less than 1% of Catholics remain unreached. And as you go through the streets or into the city, then into the mountains and countryside, you look and you can't find churches, you can't find Christians, there are so few. So it's challenging, and it's challenging. What I miss the most in Cambodia is not the food from France or my family or my friends, but it's the presence of Christ Church. I miss the cathedral, the chanting. I miss the processions and celebrations. But that's what we've come to bring here, because we know how much joy we have in glorifying God and in being glorified in His presence. So that's what we've come to bring here. Of course, it's difficult, and it's just, where should we start? It's unbelievable to say that the starting point of the mission here in Cambodia 500 years ago was the same as that in the Philippines. But Philippines, through God's grace, has become a fully Catholic country with incredible missionary kind of like overflow. But for Cambodians, because of a very different history with a lot of scars and a lot of like tragedies, of course, the situation is very different. So we are here with a lot of other missionaries, but there's so much work still to be done.
So let's talk about your book about St. Carlo Acutis, which you wrote and published before he was even beatified, before most people would have heard about him. So what's the story behind the book?
So as I was leaving on mission, I was invited by a friend of mine called Barbara, who invited me to join the World Youth Day in Panama. I was completing my license in Thomistic studies in Rome, and I was like, well, I'm a bit old now for the World Youth Day, and I'm a priest, and I was like, I'm not a youth, but Panama, I was like, yeah, sure, and of course she asked me to help interpret for the Pope and all the French pilgrims. So I was like, this is awesome, I should go. And I went there, and I realized, I was going to leave France soon, and that's not through French pilgrims, and that's not through French friends. And they said, Father Will, it's great that you're helping the Universal Church, but what are you doing for the youth of France? And I felt kind of like, I need to do something. Who's going to inspire the user friends? And I was like, I'm nothing to inspire people. I mean, I'm just a young priest and I'm just struggling in my own vocation. And what can I do about it? What can I do for them? And he said, why don't you write a book? That way you kind of leave something behind. So you leave your book and people can read it. And that's basically what I did. I thought, well, I won't write about me. I'll write about a guy that I really like called Carlo. And I had heard about him for years. And I decided when I went back to Rome to write to his mother and say, hey, your kid is pretty cool. Maybe we should write a book about it. And we wrote a book about him in French. There was already a book by the postulator, Nicolas Gori, which was the book on which, of course, I based my own book, was a Polizio and various documents that I had collected left and right, and also interviews that I made with various people who had known Carlo firsthand, like Rajesh or his father or his doctors or his friend or his cousin, people like that. And mostly, it was not just about writing a book about Carlos, but it was writing a book about the call to holiness for young people through the life of virtues. We are called to live a life of grace, which takes root in our life through the 7 virtues, the 3 theological virtues and the cardinal virtues, which structure the Christian life. And that's what I wanted to bring back to the youth. So I wrote that book. I published it. We had a small event to say, hey guys, there's a new book out. And just a few weeks, like 2 weeks later, I was off on the train and I rode the train all the way to Cambodia. I had forgot about that book. And what happened is that just a few years later, we heard that Carlo was going to be beatified. So I was like, my editor called me and said, hey, we're going to have to print more books. Okay, print more books if you want, whatever you want to do. I'm not taking any money. I don't need that money. I'm on mission. So you do whatever you want. So he did that. Then he called me and said, hey, the guy in the US wants to translate your book. I said, sure, translate my book into English. I could do it, but I'm not doing that because I'm on mission learning Cambodian. So I can't translate my own book, even though I speak English. But I would like, do it if you want. And I let him do it, and he did it. And what happened is that this kind of like wave of enthusiasm, took over the whole world about Carlo. And people were like, who is this guy? Especially in the middle of the pandemic, people were like, what's going on? There's this guy that no one knew about like 5 years ago. And suddenly people are like, he's interesting. And for us, we're spending so much time stuck behind our screens because of the pandemic. Maybe we need a model that can inspire us to live a holy life, not blocked by our screens, but through our screens to be able to share God's glory in becoming missionaries of the new territory called internet.
As you were learning about his life and researching and writing the book, did it ever occur to you that he might be canonized one day? Did you seriously contemplate that possibility?
Well, yeah, because when we had written the book, already the Polizio had gone very far. I mean, we got from the diocesan phase to the Roman phase, and already we had, what I wrote about was the heredity of virtues. I mean, that we knew that he was well engaged, but never had I imagined that it would go so fast because, it's pretty exceptional. Since the Middle Ages, we've had saints like Peter of Verona who were canonized in just a few months. But very rare are the examples of saints like Carlo Acutis who were canonized while their parents are still alive. So that was, unexpected. But I'm just a small part of a huge process, and I'm happy to be part of it because when I go to events across Asia or even back in Europe and the US where I was recently, I see like the enthusiasm that there's for Carlo Acutis, and I'm like, this is awesome. And I'm just happy that I was there a bit like 5 minutes earlier, but I was just there like a few minutes earlier. And then everybody came in. And I was like, this is unbelievable. And more people will come because Carlo is starting a new movement of young men and young women standing up and answering to the call to be holy. It's not about becoming, fanatics of this new guy who really doesn't have much to say. He's just an ordinary kid like you and me. He hasn't written like many books or any great thing. He just tried to write this exhibition about Eucharistic miracles, died just as it was coming out. And he tried to live a holy life, loving Jesus, loving his neighbor. And that's all that we have to do to become holy. It's not that difficult. It's actually quite easy.
You did say how it was almost unbelievable. And, I was born the same year Carlo was born in 91. And you must be about the same age as well.
I'm about 3 years older. Carlo's my little brother in heaven. I'm from 1989.
And just to think, that someone our age can be a saint, it kind of blows your mind, doesn't it? So what message does this send to young people? How can this fact inspire young people today?
Well, there's a major wall between us in heaven, and it's a firewall. That firewall is on our phone. And it's a big problem that we have, that everybody who's in heaven today went to heaven without a cell phone. And we're going to have to go to heaven with cell phones in our hands, with computers, with iPads and iPhones and whatnot, and all those things, which could become incredible tools that we could use for good, and we're going to try. Unfortunately, too often, the world has taught us to use them in a way that destroyed our soul. And so the question is, how can Carlo Acutis, who only had a Nokia, which was a very basic phone back in 2005, how can he teach us in his pioneering way of using new technology to use it in a way that would sanctify our soul? That's what we can learn. That's what can give us hope. Because I know a lot of us are struggling with the proper use of internet. A lot of us are like, it's too much screen time for one day, or it's too much procrastination or whatnot. And then I want to tell you, it depends what you're doing with your phone, guys. If you're wasting your phones and you're spending all that time to spread the good news, like there's guys for online missionaries, like Salon Community, which is a Brazilian community, has an incredible online apostolate. There's guys like what we're doing now. I don't feel like I'm wasting my time. I'm in front of my screen, but I'm talking to Amy, and I hope that the people who watch this will receive, through this mediation, some kind of good news that changes their lives. So we're looking at screens, but we're not wasting our schools. We're using those screens and turning them into a new gospel, a way to proclaim the good news to the nations. It's awesome. And that's what Carlo did in a very rudimentary, pioneering way. And we want to develop that in his own way, with his inspiration after his inspiration and his model.
What was one aspect about Carlo's life and faith that you would say can either surprised you or deeply moved you as you were writing the book?
I enjoyed the fact that he had friends. Carlo was an only child, which was one of my case. I'm from a large family. I have 5 brothers and sisters, but Carlo was an only child. And oftentimes I've met people who suffer from loneliness in the world, and I suffer from loneliness a lot on mission. And as in the priest lives, you become kind of an only child, because suddenly you don't have brothers and sisters. You have priests, but as a secular priest, you're not part of a community, and you struggle with that loneliness. You're like, how do you struggle and how do you overcome loneliness in life? And I was impressed that a guy who could have been such a lonely child became so altruistic and loving of others, caring of the poorest of the poor, of the most appreciated peoples, like your own staff. How many times we treat our staff like, if we have a cleaning lady, or if we have a cook, or if we go to McDonald's and you ask for a burger, or if we go to the shop and tell the woman who's taking care of our grocery bag, we treat them in a way that we kind of forget that they have a soul. We forget that that person has had a bad day, and that if she's not being very nice, maybe she needs a word of consolation instead of, condemnation. And Carlo had that, for all the doorkeepers, the homeless people, and his own friend, Rajesh, who was at the beginning just one of the staff of his parents. And he's still working for the family. Can you imagine? That guy hasn't disappeared nowhere. He's still there. And so when I go and I stay sometimes with the family of Carlo Acutis, I still meet the guy who knew Carlo. And he's like, yeah, it's not a legend. That guy changed my life. And I love that. When you meet people who've met God's grace in their life and they can still witness about it, it's so beautiful. And that's what I liked about Carlo, is that Carlo had friends. And Carlo evangelized through friendship. Friendship not just with people like him, like his friends and classmates, but friendship also with people like men and girls, boys and girls, men and women, or even elderly people, like his grandmother and his grandmother's friends. When he went to, the south of Italy, they have a house there, south of Naples. And he would be friends with the old ladies, and he would pray the rosary with them. And they're like, this kid is so cute. And that's just a nice way to evangelize people. It was also just like his teachers, all of his teachers. And even on his last breath, when he was on his deathbed, he was becoming friends with the doctors. The doctors told me, I met them at San Ferraro Hospital in Monza, just on the outskirts of Milano. The med doctors were like, he wanted to become our friends. He wanted to have a relationship with us. He wanted to, care about us. And that's what I think taught me something about him. That whenever you have loneliness in your life, whenever you're tempted to just think that you're alone in the world, try to come out and realize that God is asking you to share his love with others, to what we call friendship, which in the 21st century speaks to a lot of people of my generation as the best way to share the gospel, not to impose it through authority or through command, through kind of like, influence that would just kind of be self-centered, but in a friendship which is self-sacrificial about caring and loving for others.
Mm. You have known Carlo's mother, Antonia, for quite a few years. And through your many conversations, you must have learned a lot about what their relationship was like. So what interesting or inspiring insights would you be able to share with us about her relationship with her son?
So what inspired me and what's the thing I find beautiful about not only her, but also her husband, because they're a beautiful Catholic couple. They're very discreet and they try to keep it low key because, of course, they're being put in the spotlight more than they would desire. They have a family business to keep running. They also have two children that were born almost miraculously after the death of Carlo. Not easy to say that they're trying to follow the call of holiness that their child answered. That's what I find beautiful, because very mundane Catholics were transformed by the genuine faith of a little child. And that's what I want to tell a lot of people. In our generation, a lot of people are coming back to church through the questions of a child. Whoever we are, whenever we start having children, those children are going to have the questions about the meaning of life. It's just part of our human nature. It's a little part of our brain that's there and that has to answer that question. And we need to question it. We need to be able to provide an answer to it. And parents can't just turn on the TV or throw a cell phone at their kid. They need to go with them and go and look for that answer. And that's what Carlo's mother did. And that's why Carlo's mother went to the extent of studying theology, because his kids had so many questions that she had to do a licentiate in theology so she could answer all his questions. Because you're like, kid has too many questions. And, about transubstantiation and the history of the Eucharist, the miracles and whatnot. That's why Carlo's mother went all the way to Rome to study theology. And she had the degree in theology like a priest, which is quite interesting, because I think a lot of parents could try to, study more about theology to be able to answer to the question of their children, not just to know more, yes, but only to love more, to love Jesus more, because you know more as your children help you realize how merciful God has been with you.
And in your book, you also describe Carlo as a sign of contradiction in the modern world. So can you elaborate on what makes his life almost countercultural in today's society?
Purity. One word. The one word is purity. Our culture is insane about impurity. We're fascinated by all those things that attract our looks, that attract our likes, our clicks, and it's all impure desires. The heart of man is broken, and so none of our desires can be 100% pure. But we can, through a relationship with Jesus Christ, be purified through the water of baptism and then through the faithful frequentation of the sacraments. And Carlo knew that. He knew that he was broken by original sin, but he was saved by baptism. And as he encountered Jesus in the Eucharist, he realized that the more he would receive Jesus, the more he would be like Jesus. And that's why his heart is so pure, because he committed to go to the Eucharist every day, to go to the chapel every day, to take time in prayer, to pray the rosary, to follow Jesus through Mary. And that's what he did. And I think that's what's countercultural in our life today. There's kind of like an exaltation of pride and impurity in our world. It's something that we all struggle with because it's everywhere. And that's how social networks work. And it's okay that you be attracted, for instance, to money, or if you're a man attracted to a woman, or if you're a woman attracted to men, and you see a beautiful woman and like you're going to give her a like or not, you're like, or you want to put yourself, with a beautiful selfie. And this vanity is kind of a normal part of human life. The problem is when it becomes so impure that you cannot even see God through it anymore because you've fallen into moral sin. So it's normal that, you put a beautiful picture of yourself online. I'm not going to say it's bad, but the problem is when it becomes so vain that the death of sin overcomes the beauty of creation. And that's what Carlo restores. You see, Carlo, honestly, I'm not sure if he's a super looking guy, kind of a chubby teenager, if you ask me. He was in better shape when he died than he was when he was 12. But he just an ordinary kid. But there's something beautiful about him because he's radiating with God's love. And when you look at it, his mother is the same thing. His mother, I hope you won't be offended, but she's Italian mama, and there's something beautiful about the Italian mama. It's not, this kind of Hollywood star or anything, but there's something just natural about letting the space flow. Those St. Carlo Acutis, for me, teaches us about the mystery of transfiguration, which St. John Paul II inserted into the luminous mysteries. And I think that's what he can teach us. Today, transfiguration is necessary in a broken society where we've destroyed the image of man and woman and reduced it to something animal. God redeemed our nature, took it from what was broken, so he sold it to something divine. And that's what I think Carlo understood when he understood that our bodies are a temple of the Holy Spirit. I love one example of Carlo is that he would do something very funny when he would go swimming at the pool, and that he would see boys or, his coetanei, his people who are his age, that they would I don't know how to whistle, but they would go whistling when they see a nice girl. And what he would do he wouldn't sermon or chastise them. He just pushed them in the water. Say, shut up, And I love that. I love how he did that. It was just kind of way that, he was not Savonarola, who was this kind of Dominican monk who would, chastise any people would sit in public. But he was aware that you can't just go around and whistle and whisper when you see a cute girl and be very disrespectful of her being a body of the temple of the Holy Spirit. And I find that very important that for himself, he was aware of that. Is that in a culture where things like pornography or online, how do you call it, envy has become so omnipresent, he was aware of the battle that we'd have to lead. And in some ways, he died before he had to lead any of those battles. But he can teach us. And we have to try to say, can we be as pure as he was in our use of technology? It's difficult because when we're on technology, it's fascinating. Technology is a tool. It's a power. It's like the ring and the Lord of the Rings. It's a power, but, I'm not going to quote Spider-Man, but with great power comes great responsibility. It's kind of cheap to go on that one here, but I just want to say that he was aware of the power of technology, and that's why he used it with a lot of sense of responsibility. And if we want to keep a pure heart and watch over our purity, we need to use technology with a higher sense of responsibility.
That's very well said. And I often think about how in a world that has, by and large, turned its back on God, turned away from God, Christianity has once again become countercultural. But it doesn't mean that we have to shun the world. It doesn't mean that we have to shelter ourselves and our families from the world. And I think St. Carlo is a perfect example of that, isn't he? How you can interact with the world, you can stay engaged with the world, while, as you said very well, remaining pure.
Yeah, there's something nice about Carlo is that he's a jeans and stains and sneakers. So most saints in our churches, they wear weird clothes like me. They have long beard and long robe, and that's kind of the easiest way to become a saint. I'll tell you, honestly, if anybody learning how to become a saint, if you look at history, the easiest way is, to follow Christ fully. But history also shows that ordinary people, ordinary laymen and laywomen have also been holy. We're getting two new guides on the altars with this canonization called, the first canonization of Pope Leo, Saint Giorgio Frassati and St Carlo Acutis. But not only them, we have, the Habsburg couples. We have, little saints like Saint Maria Goretti. And we have just plenty of saints that show us that we can be saint today. But we need a proof. And the proof is given in Carlo Acutis. Carlo Acutis is a proof that in the 21st century, young men and young women can still become holy. It's not impossible. Of course, there's more temptations than, 100 years ago, but we will overcome this. And the grace of God is enough for us to become holy. So that gives us hope. Carlo was just insane in sneakers, wearing ordinary clothes, playing ordinary sports like soccer and whatnot. And he gives us hope because that's what we do. We play video games. We play soccer. We wear jeans and we can become holy.
Yes. And I'm so glad you made that point about technology. As long as we use technology responsibly, it can be a vehicle as well. We can use it to get ourselves and others closer to heaven as well. And that's so important because people often just feel really cynical about technology in general, about the internet, about social media. So I think it's very important, again, to show this other model, a young person using technology for our good.
Absolutely. I mean, there's a kind of technophobia in the church today. A lot of the elderly senior clerics will be very reluctant to using internet and very concerned about it. A lot of them don't really know how to use it. And in a lot of our seminaries or churches, we're not very up to date with the use of technology. Thank God. The first thing that Pope Leo did was update the website of the Vatican, which had not been updated since Carlo Acutis. So I think it's a good sign, you see. And I hope that we will try to update our use of technology, not that we become enslaved to it, but that we master the tool so that we can use it for God's glory. And it's important. We don't all have to be perfect about it. Like some of us are, church cantors, some of us are organists, some of us serve the altar, and some of us are just, those who are doing the accounting for the parish. There's so many different charisms. But if some young people today have that charism for technology, please use it well for God's glory and help the church to use those tools so it can share the gospel. And it's happening already. I mean, there's so many amazing guys out there. You probably follow a lot of them. And I'm impressed at how so many young people are following in the footsteps of Carlo Acutis in using those new technologies to share the good news.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and for giving us that insight into your relationship, especially with Carlo's mother. And as we said at the beginning, you have served in Cambodia for the last 6 years. And I understand that our organization, Aid to the Church in Need, has supported you. So could you just say a little bit about what help you've received from us?
So, of course, I'm part of the society called the Paris Foreign Mission Society. And our relationship with L'aide à l'Église dans les Prêtres has been a long-term, very win-win relationship because you guys are really helping us raise the awareness of the missionary spirit. We need a missionary spirit to be revived in Europe, not only in England, but also in Germany and Spain and Italy and all the countries where Aid to the Church in Need is working. And we've been incredibly blessed with the support of Aid to the Church in Need in Germany. With our parish pastor, we worked to ask for a subsidy, and it was provided to us. It was tens of thousands of dollars, and it allowed us to rebuild the Church of St. Michael's in Siennoville, which is right on the beach where I'm living. And that church today, which is the only standing church that was not destroyed by Pol Pot and the communists, the only church built during the sovereign period of Cambodia between 1945 and 1960, it's the only one which is still restored and which has now become part of the national heritage of Cambodia. And so we were really appreciative for the support of Aid to the Church in Need. And hopefully there can be more done because there's so much here that remains to be built, especially an incredible church on Mount Bokor. There's a church there that remains to be built. It's a landmark of Cambodia, and it remains to be rebuilt. And we're working on it very hard at the moment, trying to find the right sponsors and people who can help us share the faith and build places where God can be glorified in His liturgy and His sacraments, so that people can really receive God's presence as Carlo did in the cross and the church that he had just across from his house.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for your time, Father Will. It was really lovely talking to you.
My pleasure.
And thank you all for joining us today, for tuning in to the podcast. Please follow us on your platform of choice and see you again soon. God bless.
Bye, guys.